And we'll take you around the world in the next 30 minutes, starting with what's happening in India. India shames Pakistan at United Nations response to Pakistan's baseless allegations. India says Pakistan is habitually misusing Human Rights Council and says it is time Pakistan ended border infiltration and financing terrorism against India. Pakistan and India agreed to a prisoner exchange on Thursday despite heightened tensions on the borders between the nuclear-armed arch rivals. According to the proposal initiated by India, prisoners in three categories, women, those with learning disabilities and those above 70 years of age, would be released and repatriated to their home country. A major fire broke out after an explosion inside a boiler at a chemicals company in Boisar Tarapur Industrial Estate in Palghar district in Maharashtra. No casualties have been reported in the incident. Reports suggest the impact of the blast was felt in the villages in the vicinity of around 8 kilometers. Fugitive gangster Dawood Abraham's aide Farooq Takla was arrested in Mumbai on Thursday after he was deported from Dubai. Takla was one of the accused in the 1993 serial blast in Mumbai. Central Bureau of Investigation has moved top court and challenged acquittal of Arushi's parents. This move comes more than 5 months after the Allahabad High Court set the dentist couple free. Protests erupted in India's northeastern Guwahati city over Bangladesh President Abdul Hamid's visit to the country. Protesters accused the neighbouring country of giving shelter to China and Pakistan for carrying out anti-Indian activities. A top NATO commander has hit out at Pakistan, saying the Haqqani network continues to enjoy significant support inside the country. He added that this has led to the terrorist group still carrying out across the border in Afghanistan and that the Haqqani group is effectively driving the Taliban today. With terror on agenda, several countries spoke against Afghanistan at the United Nations Security Council meet. The United States said onus on Taliban to talk. Without taking any names, US added that countries that are supporting Taliban with weapons are only fueling the conflict. Even Russia slammed Afghanistan, saying security situation in the country is complex and concerning. Moscow said there is a major activity of Islamic State in North Afghanistan and that increase in foreign forces has not resolved any problem in the region. A curfew in the Sri Lankan town of Kandy has been temporarily lifted following days of violence against members of the minority Muslim community by Buddhists. A state of emergency was declared following the clashes. New York City police are looking for a man who seemingly unprovoked beating of a fellow subway rider was captured on surveillance camera footage at a news conference. NYPD Chief of Detectives Robert Bios said they have identified the suspect as 24-year-old Jose Hastings of Queens. Danish inventor Peter Madsen denied murdering Swedish journalist Kim Wall aboard his home-built submarine in August, telling a court he disposed of a body after she died breathing in exhaust fumes. On the first day of his trial, Madsen said he had to dismember the corpse to get it out of the submarine. National Security Advisor Thong Chun said Myanmar seeks clear evidence to support accusation of ethnic cleansing or genocide against its Muslim minority in Rakhine State. Chun said that only a minority of the Rakhine's population of 3 million has left, adding that Myanmar would be willing to repatriate and ensure the safety of people who had fled. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called a nuclear agreement with Iran dubious and warned that Iran wanted to extinguish Israel's present and future. US President Donald Trump has threatened to withdraw the United States from the agreement unless Congress and European allies help fix it with a follow-up pact. Israel Supreme Court ordered a former Australian school teacher who is wanted in a home country on suspicion of sexually abusing students to remain in police custody in a psychiatric hospital until it reaches a decision on whether to release her to house arrest. Hundreds of ultra-Orthodox Jews clashed with Israeli police in Jerusalem during a protest against military recruitment. Police used a water cannon and mounted officers to disperse the protest that briefly turned violent. Britain says it will methodically work out who carried out a nerve agent attack on Russian ex-spy and his daughter, then take robust action. British media and some politicians have speculated that the Russian state could be behind the attack. British police named Sergeant Nick Bailey as the police officer injured with a nerve agent attack on a former Russian spy and his daughter in southern England on Sunday. The Russian Central Election Commission refused accreditation for 2 media outlets, depriving thousands of observers of access to polling stations for the upcoming presidential elections. Russians will vote for the country's leader on March 18 in an election which the current President Vladimir Putin is widely expected to easily win. US President Donald Trump said his administration was almost finished with the legal paperwork designed to block the use of bump stocks, devices that turn firearms into machine guns. The Republican president said last month he had signed a memorandum directing the Attorney General to draw up regulations banning the devices. 2 senators from opposite parties teamed up to introduce new legislation that would allow federal judges to take guns away from people deemed to be at risk of committing violence. They said family members and local authorities could request a 72-hour injunction to remove firearms from a threatening person. However, that order could still be challenged in court. US President Donald Trump's tariffs on steel and aluminium imports will start in 15 days with initial exemptions for Canada and Mexico and the possibility of alternative for other countries. The tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminium proclaimed by Trump on Thursday appear to soften what the US president billed last week as a global no exemptions move to protect the 2 industries under a 1962 national security trade law. U.S. House of Representatives Speaker Paul Ryan said the United States should initiate surgical actions against China to stop it from dumping steel and aluminium instead of President Donald Trump's broader tariff plan. According to a latest study, U.S. President Donald Trump's proposed new tariffs on steel and aluminium imports could cost the U.S. economy nearly 146,000 jobs. Trump announced on March 1st that the United States planned to impose a 25% tariff on steel imports and 10% tariff on aluminium imports to protect the domestic industry, citing national security concerns. U.S. President Donald Trump's former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, pleaded not guilty to additional criminal charges stemming from the investigation into alleged Russian meddling in the 2016 elections and will face trial in July. Manafort pleaded not guilty to charges ranging from bank fraud to filing false tax returns that were brought by Robert Mueller. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said that more African nations should apply concrete diplomatic and economic pressure on North Korea in order to achieve complete, verifiable and irreversible denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson said that the answer to political turmoil in Ethiopia was greater freedom for people and that the country's state of emergency should be lifted as quickly as possible. The comments were made at a news conference with his Ethiopian counterpart, Workneh Gebreyeveh. European Central Bank decided to keep key interest rates unchanged at the monetary policy meeting in Frankfurt, Germany. Interest rates on the main refinancing operations on the marginal lending facility and the deposit facility will all remain unchanged at 0%, 0.25% and minus 0.4% respectively. A group of European Union countries met to develop their first defence projects together under a new military pact that excludes Britain, also delaying a decision on any future British role until the end of this year. The aim is to gradually integrate armed forces in a show of unity after Britain's 2016 vote to quit the 28-nation bloc, backed by a multi-billion euro fund for defence research and development that's now under negotiation. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki defended Poland's controversial court overhaul in Brussels during a meeting with European Commissioner head Jean-Claude Juncker. Juncker gave Morawiecki a brief bear hug before the Pole presented him with the Warsaw's white paper on the new laws. Bosnia-Herzegovina stands ready to make headway towards becoming a candidate for accession to the European Union. However, to move through the process towards the joining the wealthy 28-member bloc, Bosnia-Herzegovina will have to avoid the political crisis that had affected the country in recent years. European Council President Donald Tusk said Brexit negotiations risk stalling if Britain does not present a realistic solution for the future of the Irish border. Tusk said that he expects the UK to provide a specific and realistic solution to avoid a hard border. Without this, he said, it's very difficult to imagine substantial progress in Brexit negotiations. Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met the head of the Anglican Church in London, promising to promote interfaith dialogue as part of his domestic reforms. The Prince Mohammed is making an official visit to London to promote Saudi Arabia as a tolerant, modernized economy and build a wider new trade and investment relationship with Britain. Social Democrat Heiko Maas, Justice Minister in the last government, is to become Germany's Foreign Minister and Chancellor Angela Merkel's new coalition government. Colombia's former FARC rebels said they will not field a candidate in the country's May presidential elections as its hopeful Rodrigo Londono battles heart problems. The group will, however, have candidates in the March 11 congressional election. The Venezuelan opposition called for its first national protest this year against elections that it calls fraudulent. The call to return to the streets on March 17 was made during the presentation of the Broad Front of a Free Venezuela, a movement that brings together political parties of the Democratic Unity Table and also unions, employers, students and teachers. Syrian government airstrikes targeted eastern Ghouta on Thursday. Airstrikes took place on Harasata, Sakaba, Hamurea and Ain Tarma. In addition to artillery shelling by the regime forces, at least 18 people have been killed in the airstrikes. An aid convoy which had hoped to enter Syria's besieged eastern Ghouta region on Thursday has been postponed. The International Committee of the Red Cross spokeswoman Anne Yolanda Giacomet said that on March 5th, a 46-truck aid had reached the area on the outskirts of Damascus but could not fully unload, and that government officials stripped out most medical supplies. The head of the United Nations Children's Agency, UNICEF, said the besieged Syrian enclave of eastern Ghouta had become a hell on earth for children and aid was urgently needed. Syria's government is 2 weeks into a fierce assault to retake eastern Ghouta from rebels, saying the offensive is needed to stop insurgent shelling of neighboring Damascus. Low-cost airline Norwegian Air inaugurated its first plane registered in Argentina as it looks to get a foothold in Latin America's number 3 economy. The Boeing 737-800 has 189 seats and Wi-Fi on its tail. It has the image of Argentine musician and composer Astor Piazzolla, best known for a song, a fusion of jazz and traditional tango. Britain's Prince Harry and Meghan Markle saw crowds turn out in force when they visited Birmingham in central England as part of a pre-wedding tour of Britain. The couple were at Millennium Point to meet the next generation of women in science, technology, engineering and math to hear about the work of 2 projects which support young people. A second winter storm in a week left more than 1 million customers without power and snarled the morning commute across the U.S. Northeast. The storm created treacherous driving conditions and teams of snow plows worked to clear the roads. Meantime, hundreds of streets were closed due to downed trees or power lines. Northeastern University women's basketball team in Philadelphia hopped off their bus and helped to push it out of the snow. A video shared on Twitter shows the players pushing the stranded bus and cheering when they managed to get moving again. Hundreds of people gathered in New York's Washington Square Park to mark International Women's Day. Many at the demonstration protested against sexual harassment and abuse targeting women. Russian President Vladimir Putin congratulated the country's women on International Women's Day. Finishing his address with a poem, Putin chose a piece by the Soviet Russian Andrei Demetrievich, where the author praises women for their beauty, wit and moral qualities. The International Women's Day was marked in Russia by the creativity of the military, who staged on March 8th flash mobs all around the country. Servicemen formed the number 8 with tanks, drew hearts on snow and even parachuted from the sky to bring Russian women flowers and congratulated. French President Emmanuel Macron visited Paris-based real estate company Jacina and said to be exemplary in terms of gender equality as he marked International Women's Day. Jacina, which has 500 employees, has ranked first in gender equality for 2 consecutive years in a survey by a corporate governance monitoring body. Hundreds of demonstrators, mostly women, marched through the streets of Paris to mark International Women's Day, demanding gender equality and raising awareness of sexual and domestic violence. Women and men, young, old, radical feminist groups and others gathered in the rain to voice their discontent and need for change through government policies. Passengers on trains running between central London and one of its main airports were treated to inspirational messages on its digital information display in honor of International Women's Day. The video on social media shows quotes from US broadcasters Oprah Winfrey, US artist Beyoncé, and French writer, philosopher and feminist Simone de Beauvoir, displayed on an electronic message board in the express train. Hundreds of thousands of women across Spain took to the streets to protest against gender inequality as they staged the country's first ever nationwide women's strike, which kicked off with midnight pot-banging rallies and were followed by morning bike demos and demonstrations under the rain in the city squares. Female workers at Spanish newspapers Pace's Madrid offices went on strike on Thursday in support of gender equality. In a video posted on the newspaper's Twitter account, the March 8th feminist strike saw female staff absent from the organization's Madrid newsroom with just male colleagues working at their desks. Women activists took to the streets across Turkey to mark International Women's Day. Thousands demonstrated in Turkish border town of Hato to raise awareness of the plight of Syrian women, particularly those in prison after 7 years of civil war. Thousands of people filled one of Istanbul's busiest streets, Istiklal Avenue, on Thursday night for International Women's Day, protesting violence against women and rape. Protesters marched and cheered while carrying banners and flags. One protester could be seen holding up a sign saying, "State, get your hand away from my body."